10-year-old Thomas lived in a small coastal town that was situated on a picturesque coast. His house was just 10 minutes from the sea, and the surf can often be heard from his window at evening hours. Facing east, the windows of his room allowed you to watch each morning the first rays of the sun over the sea. On the windowsill were placed several types of seashells that Thomas had collected from his beach walks. The walls of his room were decorated with posters depicting marine life, especially a large poster with detailed anatomy of an octopus. The narrow streets of the city fell directly to the beach like a natural continuation of the seashore. The sea wind brought a slight coating of salt on the old lamps in these streets. The air here was always filled with the fresh aroma of the sea and the cries of seagulls circling over the waves. From a very early age, Thomas had an extraordinary interest in marine life. Every weekend, he begged his parents to take him to the local aquarium, which was housed in an old red brick building. The staff at the aquarium already knew Thomas well and often allowed him to be present during the feeding of marine life. There, with his nose pressed against the cool glass of large aquariums, he could watch the sea creatures for hours. The boy carefully wrote down his observations in a special notebook with a waterproof cover that his father gave him. He was particularly interested in octopuses, their sliding movements, their fantastic ability to change the color and texture of the skin, their flexible tentacles that could penetrate the narrowest cracks. Thomas often stayed at their aquarium the longest, watching these amazing creatures solve the puzzles that the aquarium staff offered them. Of all the sea creatures, one in particular took a liking to Thomas, a small spotted octopus that always swam up to the glass when he saw the boy. On that July morning, Thomas got up much earlier than usual to the sound of waves against the rocks at the coast. The sun barely rose above the horizon, tinging the sky with delicate pink tones. There was a soft breeze blowing in the room, ruffling the curtains with the salty smell of seaweed. At once, he felt that today was going to be different. Hastily, he refreshed himself with cold water, changed into his favorite t-shirt with a picture of marine life on it, and ran downstairs to the kitchen where his mother was preparing his breakfast. The fragrance of freshly baked cinnamon rolls wafted through the entire kitchen, complemented by the smell of newly brewed coffee. Thomas started packing his beach bag, made of heavy, waterproof material after breakfast. It included a big blue towel with a picture of starfish, sunscreen with a high degree of protection which my mother was always insisting on using, 1-liter bottle of water, several tuna sandwiches wrapped up in wax paper, plastic bucket of bright yellow color, and a red plastic spade with a convenient long handle. These last two items were his most important tools for exploring the beach. With their help, he collected interesting shells and studied small marine life in tidal puddles that formed between coastal rocks. Though Ma's father, who had served for 15 years as a marine biologist at a local research institute, encouraged his son's interest in marine life. He often told the boy fantastic things about the underwater inhabitants that he studied in his laboratory. That morning he was going to the beach with his family, intending to show his son some interesting places where at low tide you could find starfish and crabs hiding under the rocks. The day turned out to be amazingly hot, even for the middle of summer. The burning sun was quickly heating the sand, and Thomas donned his favorite thick-soled beach sandals. The thermometer on the veranda of their house already showed 30 degrees Celsius, though it was only 10 in the morning. Most vacationers congregated closer to the water, where the sea breeze brought the long-awaited coolness. However, Thomas decided to venture to the far side of the beach, almost devoid of people, as his curiosity got the better of him. As Thomas passed a cluster of big rocks, covered with small shells and dried seaweed, he suddenly saw something strange in the sand. It was some kind of dark patch, half covered by the sand, which was far from the edge of the water, almost at the high tide line. His curiosity got the best of him, and the boy went to the strange object. As he drew closer, he started to make out faint movements that couldn't be explained by the wind alone. Carefully dropping to his knees, not wanting to disturb the find, Thomas started to carefully dig up the sand with his small spade. With each movement, his heart beat more and more, and his hands slightly began to tremble with excitement. The sand was hot and dry, which made the boy work even faster. Soon he made out the unmistakable outlines of tentacles and realized that it was an octopus that had been cast by who knows what means far from the water, possibly at high tide during the night. The animal was exhausted, worn out by the heat. His skin was dry and dull, having lost its brilliance, and the movements of his tentacles slow and heavy, as if every movement took great effort. Thomas remembered his father telling him how the octopuses could be away from the water for some time and survive off of the trapped moisture within the folds of their gills and skin. But this fellow had long since passed his limit in the direct hot sun. Unless rushed back to their aquatic haven, he could have died of dehydration due to the potent rays of the sun. Without wasting a minute, Thomas called his parents with a loud shout. His sonorous voice echoed across the deserted part of the beach, reflecting itself from the coastal cliffs. Having heard his son's excited cry, the father ran up to him quickly, leaving deep footprints in the dry sand. Having stared at the octopus, he immediately appreciated the seriousness of the situation. His professional experience suggested that every minute counted. It was necessary to act quickly, but very carefully, so as not to harm the animal even more. Thomas filled his yellow bucket with sea water in record time and tried to get it away from the shore, where it was cleaner and cooler. He ran back to the octopus as the water spilled over the edge, leaving a wet path on the hot sand. The father showed how to properly help the animal move into the bucket using a spatula as an improvised stretcher, so as not to injure the fragile skin of the octopus. It tensed at first, its skin visibly darkened, a natural reaction to danger. But when he was finally in the water, he began to slowly spread his tentacles, like one waking up from a heavy sleep. The family hurried to the sea, choosing a path where the sand was denser, so as not to shake the bucket with their precious cargo too much. And father pointed out the ideal place for the release of the octopus, a small natural bay, which in addition was protected from the waves by protruding basalt stones. The water here was deep enough, yet calm, with some thicket of algae where an octopus could take shelter. Thomas carefully lowered the bucket into the water, not making abrupt movements, and slowly tilted it to make a flow of seawater mix with the water in the bucket. Nothing happened for several long seconds, and Thomas' heart was sinking with concern. Then the octopus started to climb slowly out of the bucket, its motions becoming more and more confident as it sank into its native element. The color of his skin began to change, taking on a healthier reddish-brown hue characteristic of this species. Instead of swimming to the depths right away, the octopus surprised everyone by staying in shallow water, its tentacles swaying with elegance in the clear water. He turned around to face his rescuers, and his big eyes appeared to analyze them closely. A very long moment, he stared at Thomas, as if he had remembered him. Then, in one swift motion, the animal slipped into the depths and vanished among the algae. The whole day, he couldn't get this incident out of his head, and he kept turning his thoughts back to this incredible encounter. At dinner, Thomas bombarded his father with all sorts of questions about octopuses and was ready to share his knowledge by telling breathtaking facts about these animals. The boy longed for the next morning in order to go back to the beach and check whether everything was okay with his unusual friend. The next morning, the weather was far more favorable to a beach holiday. Light cirrus clouds blocked the sun from time to time, making the day less hot and more pleasant. Thomas immediately headed to the scene of the previous day's accident, carefully examining the sand for other animals that might need help. He did not expect to see the rescued octopus again, but secretly he hoped for a new meeting. Suddenly, the boy noticed an unusual turbulence in the water near the shore, in the same protected bay where they released the octopus. First, Thomas thought that it was just the undulations playing with sun rays, but then he saw a familiar silhouette. An octopus swam in the water, and due to its size and the typical markings of its tentacles, the boy was astonished to think that this was the same specimen they had saved the day before. Thomas was shocked and quietly called his parents, not to startle the unexpected guest away. They watched in admiration as the octopus kept confidently near the shore, even as if on purpose to show itself. When Thomas cautiously approached the water, the animal did not swim away, but rather stretched one of its tentacles in his direction, as to greet his savior in all seriousness. What trust and memory. Curious about his new acquaintance, Thomas was surprised when he learned that octopuses are one of the most amazing creatures in the ocean. It was amazing to find out that their blood is blue, and they have up to 3 hearts, 1 main, and 2 for gills. Because they have no bones, these freaky creatures are capable of crawling through holes the size of a coin, distinguishing objects by touch, and changing not only the color, but also the skin texture in order to copy stones or coral reefs. Most strikingly, octopuses have 9 brains, 1 central and 1 in each tentacle, allowing for complex activity and even use of tools. They easily remember people by their look and can distinguish different ones from each other, even if they are dressed the same. This amazing encounter changed the boy's life forever. It made him even more determined to be a marine biologist for the protection of such really intelligent and capable ocean dwellers, just like his father.